We're going to record because I don't, you want to get the good stuff right up front. All right. So welcome to What You're Craving. Molly here on the pod today. I am with Dr. Michael Goran and Emily Ventura. Emily is a nutrition educator and a public health advocate and a writer and a cook. And Dr. Michael is a professor of pediatrics at the Children's Hospital in LA. And the co-director of the USC Diabetes and Obesity Research Institute. We gave your big bio before this, so people have already heard about you, but I just want to remind you of who's who on the podcast because we have a lot to talk about, is all I'm saying. We have a lot to talk about. Their book, Sugarproof, in my humble opinion, is a must read. I think it's a must read, side note, not just for people who have children, for people who know children. I think this is I think what you're doing is really important. And I have a lot of questions, perhaps off the beaten path of what you've been doing on other podcasts as we do. So welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Molly, thank you so much for having us on. We're really looking forward to talking with you.
I hope you feel that way at the end, Michael.
Oh, well, I'll let you know.
You just give me like a star rating at the end, like an Uber. We'll see how we go,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know me.
Let's do it. Let's have a honest, open conversation.
I hear you. And listen, you're with family. I'm all, I haven't had sugar or flour in 12 years. I'm just fascinated how we do that with kids. Okay. So I love what you do in this book about busting myths about sugar and sweeteners. Can you give us some broad-based headlines about all humans? And then I really want to talk about with kids.
Okay, so Emily, you want to take a first stab? This is where Emily and I kind of jostled to who's going to
like a dog and pony show. I'm very into it.
Yeah. So broad-based headlines. I mean, too much sugar really is extremely detrimental, as you know. And I think what's so tricky with kids is that we're not saying to take it all out.
Right.
Because that kind of approach backfires. So we want to be really clear about that up front, because I think some people get confused about that message. We're not saying that your children cannot have any sugar. That's completely not the message. It's more just about awareness and also displacing some of these processed sugar-laden foods with healthier alternatives that kids really enjoy that can become their new staples for things that otherwise have hidden sugars, like granola bars and fruit flavored yogurts and these things that sort of just start to pile up in their diets without parents even realizing, well, wait a second, actually, this has completely tipped the balance of their diet without us even realizing it.
Well, so I want to understand
the title of the book, just quickly to add on to that, the title of the book, Sugarproof, it means, we made that word up. It's a new word, sugarproof. It's like waterproof. It's meaning being protected from, being resilient to this incredible saturation of sugar in our food environment. How do we raise kids today so that they can thrive in an environment that's overloaded with sugar?
Mm-hmm.
Not by saying you can't have it,
right,
but just what is the right healthy amount so that we don't.
Let's get to why we would even want to have this conversation. I think people are really not in the know about the impact of sugar on people in general, but also on children. So can you guys walk me through that?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at that. Because sugar has so many broad effects. That's really been the basis of why I wanted to write the book and bring Emily on board to help with that, because it's 35 years of research on the broad effects of sugar from head to toe on kids. Now, that's not to say that sugar doesn't affect adults, because it does. Like you mentioned, this book is really for everybody. But what really was important to me was a realization that kids are actually more susceptible to those adverse effects because of the fact that they're growing, their brains are building, their gut microbiomes are evolving. As those things are building, they can be derailed by too much sugar. Mm-hmm. So the adverse effects that I'm going to mention are true for adults too, but kids are more susceptible, and the research shows that sugar exposure during those critical window periods of development are more problematic. We're talking about brain development, so we see effects on learning, memory, focus, attention, behavioral issues, down through the body. Tooth decay, the most obvious outwardly effect of too much sugar. It's not the sugar that ruins the teeth, it's the acid produced by the bacteria that thrive on the sugar.
Wow.
The gut, the liver, the pancreas, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular risk, some of the chronic diseases that might not be diagnosed in childhood, but they're brewing slowly. Type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, what we call chronic diseases, because they're long-term, slowly developing.
Oh, so they start here.
They start. It's like the frog. You put the frog in the low warm water for a long time. It gradually kills the frog. So what's happening is all these chronic diseases start to develop in child, if not before, actually, during some evidence shows they're developmentally, they have developmental origins. So really broad-based effects. Some are readily apparent in childhood and some are just long-term that start early.
When you're talking about the behavioral problems, can you get a little bit more specific? I loved this in the book. I mean, there's very clear evidence on this. Can you just make us a little smarter about it?
Yeah, Emily?
Sure. Yeah, just leading into that too, I wanted to mention that a lot of parents might think, well, my child's not overweight. You know,
yeah.
my child is
that's on my
active.
list, Emily. I love the
that's
tofu, right? Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. I love me a tofu conversation, let me tell you.
Yeah. So the behavioral effects definitely fall into that category, but some of the other more silent effects that Michael mentioned also do. But in terms of behavior, you know, what's interesting is that a lot of times parents aren't really having the chance to observe their children mid-morning. So they might, you know, give them breakfast and send them off to school and they don't see what's happening an hour and a half later. I think the pandemic has been a wake up for a lot of parents because they are seeing what their kids are like at 10 in the morning.
And what do you think their kids are like after that sugary breakfast?
Well, so lethargic, sleepy, irritable, less able to concentrate, those kind of things. If you have a sweet breakfast, you have a big crash typically, you know, an hour or so later. And, you know, a lot of parents are seeing this in their toddlers too, and they are with their children and they don't know how to manage it. And they think, oh, is this just, you know, characteristic of their age? And then certainly some of it in a toddler can be, but a lot of it is really exacerbated by what you're giving your child for breakfast. So things like juice and sweetened cereals, even the ones, and this is where marketing comes in, it's so tricky because a lot of these products, they say, oh, well, they're made with 100% whole grains. You know, even Fruit Loops now have a whole grain marketing message on them.
Isn't that amazing?
Which is just insane, you know, and the cereals are so convenient. And they're so easy, kids like them, easy to rely on, and they're used, you know, sometimes not just as breakfast, but toddlers are snacking on them mid-morning out of a little snack cup or whatever. And the sugar roller coaster can just start in the morning, but then continue all throughout the day in terms of cycles of highs and lows with blood sugar and attention and mood and ability to concentrate.
Can we stop on fruit juice? Because I want to like have a whole conversation about food halos with kids, because I think that's like so much of what you're saying is like, well, it's this and they love it. So I was going to the supermarket and I'm staying with my friends and my godson. And she said, can you just pick up some orange juice for him? And I'm not so well contained all of the time. And so I said, I'd prefer to pick him up a beer, Lauren. But I'm not wrong, right? Why did you just give him beer for breakfast, Lauren? I'm not always like that. You want to be friends with me. I just have moments where I lose my mind, but kind of true. Right. Kind of true, Emily. Kind of true, Michael.
Yeah,
Tell me.
You know, there's the phrase that fructose is like alcohol without the buzz. So when you do have
excuse me, I didn't know of this phrase. Don't act like this is just mainstream media, Emily. Can you say that one again?
Yeah. So fructose is alcohol without the buzz.
Okay. What's fructose for those?
Prime culprit. And I'm sure Michael will want to go into more detail on this one.
I know. I just want to talk about juice all day. Don't you?
Yeah.
This is why we're friends.
Yeah. And that's because metabolically, alcohol and fructose are metabolized by the body the same way and end up causing a lot of problems. So that's where that comes from. So fructose, there's a lot in this question. Like you said, we can talk about it all day long. So fructose, most people, okay, let me back up. Most parents know about high fructose corn syrup, right? You know about, your friend knows about high fructose corn syrup, I'm sure.
Like evil,
right?
but orange juice, good to go.
Yeah, so orange juice, apple juice might actually have more fructose than high fructose corn syrup, but because it's called fruit juice. So what if it was called high fructose fruit juice? Would your friend still want it? I mean, so it's all about the name.
Well, I really do want to talk about how children bully their parents, but that's another conversation. I think at the end of her rope, perhaps.
But it's higher in fructose. And why is that bad? So ordinary sugar is 1/2 fructose, 1/2 glucose. The sugar in fruit is predominantly fructose. So an apple, for example, 70% of the sugars are fructose, 30% are glucose. Once you extract that sugar out of an apple or out of an orange or any other fruit, it becomes highly concentrated. Fructose is taken up by the liver. It's not used around the body for energy like glucose. Glucose is the fuel of the body. All the cells in the body, from your brain to your toe, use the glucose for energy. Fructose, on the other hand, is not used directly for energy. A small amount can be converted in the gut into glucose, but only a very small amount. The rest of it is filtered out by which organ?
The liver.
The liver. The liver is an organ that's basically the filtration of the body, right? The liver just filters everything out of the blood that it doesn't want to get around. Alcohol, toxins, drugs. Fructose. Fruit
juice.
Fructose is
I feel like parents don't know this. I feel like I sit at so many dinners with so many juice boxes.
And so then the liver takes out that fructose because it doesn't want, it's a no-no, it's a red flag to the body, just like it is for alcohol. What does it do with the fructose? It converts it into fat, okay? And that fat, and the same happens with alcohol, same metabolic pathway. Once it's in the liver, it doesn't matter. It's just molecules being manipulated. So converts it to fat. That fat can get stuck in the liver and cause fatty liver disease, which is a new disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. 10 years ago, almost all fatty liver disease was alcohol-induced. Now is non-alcohol, but you could say fructose-induced fatty liver disease. If it doesn't get stuck in the liver, it goes back into the blood as fats. And fat in the blood is the starting point for what?
Diabetes. No?
No. Oh. This lipidemia, cardiovascular disease.
Oh, wow. That's where cardiovascular disease starts.
That's the link between sugar and heart disease because of the way fructose is converted to fat in the liver and then repackaged and put onto the circulation. So when you go to the doctor and they get blood and they want to measure your risk, they're measuring the lipids in your blood.
Wow.
As a risk for cardiovascular disease,
and
right?
It starts with things like fruit juice.
Yeah.
So then I have some friends who maybe got this memo, but then they're giving their kids lots of stevia and artificial sweeteners, not maybe the big players like aspartame, things that we sort of know are killing us. But what about that? You guys said some really important stuff about that I feel like is important for us all to know about.
Yeah, it's not the answer, really. I think it could cause its own set of problems, really. We think and we write about this in Sugarproof quite a lot. We need a whole book on it, on alternative sweeteners, because the industry uses them as a crutch because they may be mandated to reduce sugar. So all they do is take the sugar out and put stevia back in, or aspartame or sucralose. And then consumers are doing the same thing, thinking they're doing their bodies a favor by eliminating the calories. But as I'm sure you're interested in, it doesn't eliminate the craving for sweetness.
Of course.
Number one. Number two, the taste are not very good for most people. I don't like the taste of them. So I don't, plus they cause their own problems. Many of them are not absorbed. The reason they don't provide calories to the body, how do you eat something and not get the calories from it? Where does it go?
Right.
it's not absorbed. That's why it doesn't give the body calories. So it gives your gut the calories, and that feeds the gut bacteria and causes digestive issues.
Right. And the only thing I want to talk more about this is gut health, which is, the other brain. So we're sort of ruining the body by giving alternative sweeteners. And I've seen in my practice people's capacity to tolerate something that isn't artificially sweetened. It's like what it does to the brain about what is sweet and what isn't sweet is just out of control.
Yeah. And basically it tricks the body because research shows that kids and adults who habitually consume sweeteners actually end up consuming more calories and more sugar throughout the day. Why is that? Because when you consume a sweetener, it still activates the receptors in the body, not just in the brain, but in the gut and throughout the body, because there's sweet taste receptors everywhere. The body thinks there's sugar coming in. So if the body thinks there's sugar coming in, what's it going to do? It's going to take the sugar out of the circulation, which means you'll go hypoglycemic. So most people who talk about sweeteners say, oh, it doesn't cause a glucose spike. It doesn't cause a sugar spike. It must be okay.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, but it causes a glucose dip. And new research shows that when you have a glucose dip, you're hypoglycemic. You know when you're hypoglycemic, probably,
sure
right?
Do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like the devil's greatest coup. I really do. I think that what artificial sweeteners have made us believe we can do behaviorally with food is like unbelievable. I mean, I think you could write it in a book. People would be like, nah. So wait, Emily, can we go back to this thing about the tofu, the thin on the outside, fat on the inside? Because I think there are probably people who are listening like, oh, no problem for me and my kid. He's just a little twig.
Right.
So tell us there. And then we got to get to solution because I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, we work with so many parents and children that fall into that category. And then oftentimes it's the thought of, well, the last thing we want to do is take anything out because my child just needs more food. And the solution to that, oh, do I give them a second granola bar or a second flavored yogurt or, whatever, another peanut butter and jelly sandwich with peanut butter that has sugar and high sugar jam. So yeah.
Wait, is jam like juice? Like, would that roll the same way in the body?
Well, it's really similar because it's usually made with added sugar, but it's also concentrated fruit juice concentrate, right? So
oh boy, we are ruining lives 1 minute at a time on this podcast today. So effectively, jelly is the same thing as fruit juice. I might lose friends. I got to be honest. Like I may be losing. I literally my friend circle's just getting like smaller and smaller as this podcast continues. So.
Yeah, but we want to avoid that because what we do in Sugarproof is, we say, well, a piece of toast doesn't have to have jam written all over it, right? I mean, you can still enjoy a piece of toast in the morning and not put jam on it. We can talk about those in terms of solutions.
I really want to talk about that because I feel, okay, so the two questions I really want to get to today, let me just lay it out so we can make, when you're with friends, just talk about 800 things. So here are my two questions, the big ones. I have sat with a lot of children in my life, and the demands that they make about their sugar is as close to substance desires I've ever seen. Right. So I hear you, Mike. I hear you. Like, yeah, like it just tastes really good in and of itself or with something else on it or a sliced banana. But sit in my kitchen upstairs and tell my 5-year-old godson that he can't have jelly on a sandwich. We are going to all go take cover. So I'm curious about how we manage this already ingrained habit and the socialization of it. And like, it's pretty deep. And I know your book, I love that your book doesn't say do it all at once, but I want to get into the real depth of it because I really don't understand it. And my other question is, because the other people who I talk to, I love as much as my friends, are my clients who struggle with eating disorders, struggle with unhealthy relationships with food. And their great fear is, well, I don't want to be, labeling food as unhealthy or bad. All foods are good. It feels terrible to me to take something away because that's what my parents did to me. And look at me, my eating disorder now. So I don't know which one of those you want to attack first, but like, this is our big conversation. We got to, okay, sugar's awful for your children. Here's what we do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great questions.
Thank you.
Yes. It's a really a tough dilemma because we don't I think we often get labeled as inducing food shaming and eating disorders, but really we're trying to avoid that. Really, we certainly don't want to go down that path.
No, I don't think any of us want to cause eating disorders.
But I think people see what we were talking about, and they kind of perceive or presume that is going to be a problem with what we're doing. But we're actually trying to do the opposite, and make kids more aware of how sugar is affecting their body. And I think the issue with your 5-year-old or any 5-year-old, I had 5-year-olds 10, 15 years ago. I still have kids. I wrote the book. I've done the research for 30 years. I still have kids. We have plenty of sugar and sweet treats around. Okay. So it's not like I run a perfect no sugar ship here.
Well, that's, I think, probably relieving for people listening.
Yeah. But, we do talk about it, and we do make small adjustments here and there that I think.
What does the conversation sound like? Let's get like really granular. So what is the conversation? And Emily, you too, because you have children, like, what does the conversation sound like? Because I think that's really, we don't want to adultify them, and we don't want to scare them. We want to inform them. So what does it sound like when you're talking to your kid about this?
Well, I think, gosh, there's so much to answer in that question, and so much I want to say about it. I think it's overarching theme here for us is that we give lots of different ideas for behavioral strategies that you can use. And then it's really up to you to pick what's going to work in your situation. But overall, the idea is to not sugar police your family. So the idea is to really to help your kids develop their own internal motivation for healthy eating and their own healthy eating habits. And a lot of that you do shape as a parent, especially when your kids are really young, because you're the one doing the shopping and you're bringing things in your home. So if you're regularly buying jam and it's always in your refrigerator, and your child's already used to wanting that every day with toast, that's going to be, you're going to have to go through a process if you want to change that habit.
What does that process look like? Yeah. I mean, I think we're talking to a lot of people who are not with their 2-year-olds, like, okay, all I have to do is take the jam out of I wish that was the answer.
I think there's so many situations. So it's really age specific, context specific. So take your example of the, hey, Molly, can you pick up a carton of orange juice? Your answer, oh, shall I get beer? That's metabolically you were right. But okay, what is what is the actual solution? Is it to just not bring in the orange juice, and then you deal with a miserable 5-year-old for an hour or two, but then you might have solved the big problem that you're just kind of putting off a problem down the road. Right. So, maybe you have to deal with it now for a short amount of time. Or maybe you bring home the orange juice and you do an experiment, or maybe you can do it, you can dilute the orange juice by half, and your godson's probably still going to enjoy that orange juice and not notice the difference. Mm-hmm. Or you can squeeze an orange into a glass of water. There's ways to quickly, do it as in the immediate, which is not buy the orange juice and not bring it into the house. Right. Find an alternative strategy, or kind of do a more gradual replacement. That. So for every issue, like the jam on toast, again, you can use less jam. You can make your own chia jam, which is very quick. You can put ricotta onto,
I'll just drop that in the comments. That's amazing. That sounds delicious.
Well, it's so simple. People think, oh, I'm not going to make jam. I'm not going to spend my whole day making jam. But you can actually buy a bag of frozen fruit, boil it down with a tablespoon or two of chia, and you have your chia jam. So
you cut it. That's really interesting. I love that. I hope that's in the book.
If you can involve your children in making that too, then they're more likely to accept it. And I think, there's a lot of ways that conversation can play out too. Kids, even really young, toddlers, really appreciate a choice. So if you say, we're not going to be having jam on toast today, but here are 2 other options. Would you like to have peanut butter and banana slices on the toast? Or would you like to have some cream cheese or ricotta on your toast? Or would you like to have almond butter? Or, give 2 or 3 options for things that are healthy and that you would be fine offering. And then they have a choice, and they're not, expected to have exactly what you're mandating.
And the same is true for breakfast cereal. In fact, a study showed that is really, really
you
great
guys,
study.
you guys love breakfast. So let's get to, that's like, we have to get there. I'm sure every podcast you're like, we need to talk about breakfast. Yes. Tell me more.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I eat breakfast only a couple of days a week. And now I have a 15 and 18-year-olds, and breakfast is like gradually, morphing into lunch.
I love
breakfast. I like it too. And what I do now is I combine breakfast for lunch. That's another story.
Another story for another podcast. Yes.
But young kids need breakfast. Let me just say that. And most kids.
Can you say that again?
Yeah. Breakfast is an important meal for young kids.
Yeah.
But it has to be done right. So let's, again, there's 100 examples or 1,000 examples of how you can modify breakfast to make it less sugar, more fiber, more nutrient dense. And the study I was going to mention was a study was done at summer camp. They split the kids into two groups. One group got pre-access to the high sugar cereals, your Frosted Flakes, your
yum, mainline that right now. They go to sleep.
Yes, Captain Crunch, the whole lot.
Stop it. Okay.
Right. Okay. The other group got the regular cornflakes, plain O's, and the low sugar options. But they also had the option of cut fruit to put on top of it. And they also gave them sugar packets. They said, if you want to add your own sugar, you can. And what they found was that kids were perfectly happy eating the low sugar variety of breakfast cereals, and they liked just kind of concocting their own little mixture. So they would sprinkle berries on it. Some of them put a little bit of sugar, not all. And at the end of the day, the group with the low sugar cereals had consumed, I think it was half as much sugar at breakfast time, more fruit, more, much more nutrient dense cereal. So there's a really important message here. You can buy a $3 box of plain O's. Just look out for ones that aren't loaded with like preservatives and other chemicals. Right. And probably half the price from the fancy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, buy some berries or a bag of flax or chia, sprinkle some fiber on it, sprinkle some berries on it. And you've kind of got your kids involved in making their own beautiful little concoction that's theirs. It's their own little godson cereal that they invented.
Well, I'm also having these two thoughts, which are, I think everybody's in a big rush all the time, at least in my world, and so I think there's a consciousness that needs to be taken on from parents if they're going to be attacking this issue. But my other thought is actually probably more from my childhood, and I think the childhood of many people who I treat, which is, okay, so my mother did this in many ways. So my family system was like, okay, it was 100 years ago, it was the carob, it was this, and she was doing it as a function of my weight and my health. But with all of the advertising and all of the targeting cultural around sugar and enjoyment, my question is just around like, well, then they're sneaking food, right? And I've even seen it in all of the homes that I spend with children. I'm watching them go in the cabinet, sneak a cookie. Look, how do you address the sort of dishonesty that maybe gets encouraged because I think that's incredibly impactful from an eating disorder perspective. How do you address that while you're doing this?
I think important is to not ever fully restrict things. I know a struggle that we have in my family is my kids attend a school here in the UK where the convention is parents send in a big bag of those individually packaged Haribo gummy bears into school to be distributed on their child's birthday. It's just the thing to do. Like most every parent does this. I don't know why. I guess they're allergen friendly because they don't have dairy and gluten and, all those things in it, and they're prepackaged so they're safe and everybody knows what's in it. So my kids come out of school on a regular basis with these gummy bears. I don't want my kids eating these gummy bears, but I don't want to tell my kids, well, you absolutely can't have the gummy bears, because then they're going to have a fixation with these gummy bears. And then as soon as they get a chance to have the gummy bears, they may overdo it.
All the gummy bears.
Yeah. So we just sort of say, okay, well, you can have some gummy bears, but it's not your healthy after school snack. So we make sure they've eaten a healthy after school snack. They hang on to the gummy bears, they have a healthy dinner. And then afterward, I might say, okay, do you guys want some gummy bears from, your treat? And then my 2 kids will usually split one package. So they each had a couple gummy bears after dinner. They don't feel like they were deprived, and we didn't.
So it's a complete additive. It's not an inclusive part of their lives. It's a complete additive.
Yeah. I want my kids to know that they can have, what the other kids are having or what's offered to them at a party and stuff. It's just more knowing strategies of timing of it, and maybe not completely overdoing it with having 3 different things or a huge portion of them.
Well, and one would have to say that perhaps parents' eating habits would have to change. Do you guys talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think things, seen in the research studies that we've conducted. I used to work in Michael's lab and was, working with families on his studies. And the kids who, were with parents who didn't make changes, if the kids were expected to make changes that the parents weren't making, it wasn't going to work.
Can you say that like 5 times for the kids in the back, Emily?
Yeah. So, I mean, just saying that in a different way, the kids whose parents made the suggested changes along with them succeeded, and the whole family made the effort together, and it was, always really successful. Whereas if the kids were expected on the side to do something different than the rest of the family, that's really, it's not sustainable. And it's kind of, in a way, I think, not fair to the child to like put them on the side and say, well, you can't have this, but the rest of us can.
Right. But I'm going to be taking handfuls of cereal all day and have a little cake here. I mean, right. I mean, I think kids are in that way are far more intuitive, far smarter. And I think in that way, that starts the pathologizing in my experience. And, that's really where the pathologizing and the good and the bad starts, is when it's not a family affair. But what do you do if your kid is sneaking food? What do you guys think? Off topic, but we're all here.
I mean, something that's related to that, and then I'll get to the sneaking food topic, is that, we're all human. We're all going to overeat on stuff that makes us feel bad sometimes. And I think you shouldn't try and necessarily, prevent your kid entirely from having that experience. So sometimes your kid's going to eat a whole bunch of stuff at a party and not feel well. You don't want to come down on them about that. You want to say, well, okay, that happened. No big deal. How did it make you feel? Next time, what could you have picked different or whatever?
That little science, like curiosity, compassion experience. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, I love my kids. This was when we were moving, and I wrote about this on our blog at sugarproofkids.com. They let them have ice cream sundaes from an ice cream truck. Because I remember getting excited about that music, playing and wanting to race out and get the ice cream. So I just let them order whatever they wanted at the ice cream truck. And one of my kids ate the whole thing and said, Mommy, I feel really sick. Why'd I eat all that? And my other kid ate half of it and said, I've had enough, and handed it to me. Wow. So, just.
What did you say when your kid said, when we have you as a captive audience, what did you say when your kid said, gosh, I feel really sick from this?
I said, well, it's okay. I'm sorry you feel sick. But it happens to all of us sometimes. And then, next time, what do you think you'd do? And, then it brings up the thing, well, I could have just ordered a smaller like popsicle, or, I could have shared with my brother so that we had one between the 2 of us. Or I could have just stopped when I felt kind of full and said, I'm done, but the sneaking food, I think, if you find out your child's doing it, don't, try not to shame them, try not to make them feel bad, and just try and bring it out. I think
that's just like a good parenting strategy in general. Just try not to shame them.
Yeah, try not to shame them, say, hey, I noticed that you were having some cookies, no big deal. What if we find some other snacks that you could, that we could have when you're feeling hungry, and we'll still have the cookies sometimes, but maybe we'll have them after dinner.
What are your guys' like top 5 favorite healthy snacks for kids?
For kids.
Yeah.
For
for kids. No. I mean, I'll have you over later, but yes, for children.
Yeah.
But I think with E, like that they can take to soccer, like what's easy and quick. What do you guys love, or what do you know that your patients love?
Yeah, we wrote about that recently. Are you talking about prepackaged stuff or?
I mean, ideally, yes. The less work, the possible. Yeah.
Yeah. We just wrote a piece on that. What was on that, Emily? There was, you remember?
So there's like, some of the crackers that are actually a little bit better. We're not huge. I'd say we aren't huge fans of crackers, but you know, if
why
your
not?
kids,
Why aren't you fans of crackers?
well, oftentimes they're just full of like refined carbohydrates and not much else. But you know, there's
Well, I
some
think
that are,
that's such an important point, though. I mean, are you guys of like the white flour is the same as sugar tribe, like I am?
yeah. I mean, I prefer my kids not having that, and if anything else, I'm not just only going to give them crackers as their snacks. So I would probably put some nut butter with it, or some hummus, or some avocado, or some cheese, so that it's not just like a carbohydrate. Or some of these crackers are made with almond flour now. We have a cracker recipe in our book that's made with flax meal that's really good, and omega-3s and high in fiber are pretty easy to make. If you do have time to make your own snacks, our roasted chickpea snacks are amazing. My kids, I'm shocked that my kids are not tired of these yet. They just always like them. And they can really quickly.
What do you do when your kids are eating the flaxseed crackers and then their friends have like the pirate's booty, and then your kid just wants the pirate's booty? I mean, I think these are the real questions. Like,
I love a bag of chips. I love crisps.
Me too.
I mean, you know, yeah. But that's one of my well, I almost said a weak spot, but I wouldn't say it's a weak spot because I actually enjoy it.
Yeah, me too.
So, but there's a couple of different types we wrote about. So there's some now that are, you know, made with avocado oil or coconut oil. There's carob chips, which are actually pretty good, where, you know, it's a little more less potato based, so it's a little less glycemic. But I think that, like Emily was alluding to, it's also about the mixture and what you're serving things with, because I think there's a lot of obsession with, potato. Give an example of something that causes a big glucose spike. But you can easily alleviate that by serving with fiber, with protein and so on. So I think it's all about the mixture. So like if you're going for an energy bar, there was a great post yesterday on Instagram that we shared that basically had several tips about how to, you know, look for the best. I mean, there's a whole aisle in the grocery store now of bars. How the heck do you choose one, right?
Totally. Totally. So there's just lots of information. So can we get to some like just really like some hard help for those people listening?
Yeah.
What do you think are a few steps, like just your fan favorites of actionable steps in this moment right now of how you can help your kids do better with eating in general, but certainly with sugar and white flour?
Yeah, well, I think, let's see, where should we start on that? You know, I think we talked about breakfast, and there's so many different ways you can eat, you know, do small exchanges or hacks at breakfast time. So really, like, what besides the orange juice, what is your 5-year-old like?
Oh no, he does great. We do great. He has some bacon. He has some apple with some peanut butter. We're nailing breakfast. You know, where we, you know, yeah, Molly's here. Everyone's on their best behavior.
You know, in that case, you know, the OJ, you know, a little bit of OJ. I mean, not every day, but you might want to cut it down to once or twice a week or something like that. But I think the breakfast hacks we already talked about. Look out for breakfast cereal is a thing, and it is super convenient. You know, you want to look for one with less than 3 or 4 grams of added sugar per serving. Make sure it has a good amount of fiber. If it doesn't, you can easily add a tablespoon of flax, and you're done with your fiber, and that's going to help a lot with the glucose spikes. Getting kids involved, like I'll let Emily talk about that, because that's what she has a lot of ideas about getting kids involved, not just in the kitchen, but also deciding what to eat. What to eat for dinner is a big topic of debate in our house. For many families, it's not. You just, you know, you show up and whatever's on the table is what you get. But I think involving the kids in that discussion is good.
I think the self-determination piece of which I really want to make sure we get to before we're out of time, but like, the self-determination piece sounds like so incredibly important, as it isn't like every study I've ever seen about anything, right? Is that when people are feeling like it's their own choice, we're doing much better.
Another thing I'll say before I hand it over to Emily is in terms of what to do is look for the hidden sugars. I mean, there's hidden sugar, 70% of foods in the grocery store. Packaged foods have some type of added sugar, but those are sugars you're consuming that you didn't even know about. So we're talking about here about peanut butter, tomato sauce, yogurt, salad dressing, frozen foods. Search out ones without added sugar, and you can eliminate a lot of sugar from your diet and probably boost the nutrient quality as well. And that's fairly straightforward thing. It may be gradual, but next time you need to buy peanut butter, look for one without added sugar. Same for ketchups and so on.
Yeah. What do you do when your kids spit it at you?
What are they spitting?
They're spitting the disgusting peanut butter you just bought them.
Oh, come on.
Oh my gosh.
Really?
Where do you live? This legit happens. Yes. I'm not eating this. And then it just becomes like a bit of a war. Though I do think if you're starting to explain it, I just don't get, wait, could I ask a question? Would you mix the two together first?
Well, yes. So
yes.
I mean, we talk about that for breakfast cereal. Like if your kids are hooked on, let's say, Frosted Flakes or Honey Nut O's, you can dilute the Honey Nut O's or mix them, right? So, and you can do that stealth if you want, but it's probably better to say, okay, have half a cup of the Honey Nut O's and I'm going to throw in half a cup of plain O's. I'm going to mix them up. So that's part of the 28-day plan.
So I'll say if it was me, I would just sit and pick out the Honey Nut O's, but I'm not your ideal child in any of these scenarios.
So you could I hadn't thought about doing it with peanut butter because it's a bit more of a messy business, but you could mix them.
Well, I think that's the nut butters. I think they're really toxic in that way because you talk about losing the taste of what it actually is. I mean, and it's so laden with sugar. It's really high up there.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's another thing we talk about is all these sugars basically are masking the actual tastes of what's in there. So, and this is kind of leading to a disruption in taste perception for kids because if everything has added sugar in it, and sugar is such a powerful taste receptor, you mask the taste. So if you ever had a blueberry muffin that tastes of blueberries, does peanut butter actually taste of peanuts?
Right. But I think in what we're saying there is then they grow into adults with these eating habits and we're setting these precedents so early.
And recognize the reason that all those added sugars exist in those foods is because kids have a built-in preference for sweetness. Okay, that's natural, but food companies are hijacking that because they want to sell more peanut butter. So how do you sell more peanut butter for kids? They know that kids prefer sweetness. It's supposed to be protective,
right? So
that they would seek out healthy calories. And now, with our food environment now, it's very different. So food companies will add sugar to peanut butter because they want kids to like it more and they hook them on that brand.
Big food is something else. And I just cannot wait till the day where that starts to be something we're really fighting.
Yeah.
So you can fight that by choosing an alternative brand and get your kid involved in that mission too.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something really important too, Molly, with the big food topic. I think just naturally, if you start having less processed foods in your diet, you're going to displace a lot of the sugar. Just it happens because processed foods tend to have added sugar.
Just in and of itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, just really helpful to shift the dialogue from being one of, this is something we can't have and we're just going to replace it with some other food product. Whereas if you just start saying, actually, look at all these enjoyable foods that we're going to have together that don't have added sugar naturally and they taste amazing. And part of it's picking stuff that's in season. So, right now strawberries are in season at our local farm shop and
watermelon all day right now. Yeah.
Sweet. They're so good. Whereas if you were to buy strawberries, 4 months ago that were shipped in from who knows where, they don't taste good. They're not sweet. They're not enjoyable. They're expensive. So kind of seizing on, what's available locally, what's available seasonally, taking your kids to the farmer's market, saying, oh, look at all these amazing things. We should, what do you want to try?
Well, there's something very beautiful, I think, too, about teaching our children about where their food comes, that it isn't just, at Wegmans, right? Like that there's kind of a larger ecosystem happening. I think that's actually quite beautiful and probably rather important for the world.
Yeah. Something I'm working on too with my 5-year-old that, might be useful for your godson and for, anyone listening.
My godson's really getting a sesh today. Lucky guy.
Yeah. We need a name. We need a name.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say.
Yeah.
Publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've just been having the thought about him, my 5-year-old as well. Actually, he is really perceptive as a young person.
They're the most perceptive of us all. Let me tell you something.
Yeah, I mean, you can't pull a fast one on your child.
Yeah.
Should you try, right? So we got this new brand of peanut butter that I ordered because my kids like peanut butter. Usually we'll buy, one brand organic peanut butter. I bought a different brand and I put it. He asked for peanut butter on toast, put it on his toast. I don't like this, mommy. So my first reaction was like, well, what are you talking about? You always like peanut butter on toast. But what's going on? And to discredit him. And then I tried it and I said, actually, I don't really like this one either. Doesn't taste like.
I love that. I love that.
Thought,
that's so validating.
The
DBT therapist in me's heart is exploding. Oh my God.
And so, I thought, well, what is it about? Is a different variety of peanut? And, and then one thing we realized was actually the brand that we usually buy has a little bit of sea salt in it. And this one doesn't. Would we like it if we put a tiny sprinkle of sea salt on the peanut butter toast? And we tried it and we said, well, we still don't really love this brand. There's something funny about the peanuts, but actually it tastes a little bit better with a little bit of sea salt. So great.
But I love this idea that instead of getting into a fight, right? Instead of getting into a power struggle, like, no, this is good for you and you need to eat it right now. You're sort of like, as it turns out, this is kind of crappy. Okay. And even with sea salt, but I love this, but what I want to say to parents listening, because my friends are like, Molly, I have zero time for this, but it's sort of like, we make time for the things that are important to us. And this, I don't know what's more important than physical health and emotional health and even all health of our children. Right.
Right.
I mean, you guys are the best. I have 1,000 more questions, but I feel like if you had to say, like, in your experience with all of your clients, both of you, question for each of you, like, what would you say would be, if you could concentrate on one thing and one thing only? You could say 2 if you want. I'd need like 3. What do you think is the most important thing to concentrate on when you're looking to improve the health of your children when it comes to sugar?
Yeah, it can be so variable. I think this is the issue, that everybody's dealing with a different set of circumstances, different ages, different contexts. And so a lot of it is very, very personalized. A lot of the issues are very personal. So I think it really kind of depends on what you're struggling with and what you want to deal with. But I would say that, even small changes are going to make a big difference. And you can start somewhere. And to answer your question, I don't have time for this. It doesn't, you can start with things that don't take a lot of time. In fact, it could save you time in the long run. So, depends on what you're dealing with. So like changing your environment, not bringing things into the house, making sure there's cut fruit in the fridge, making sure there's bottles of fresh water in the fridge to reach for, enjoying dessert together as a family and celebrating things are really important. As well. So
I love that.
There's such a lot. What do you think?
I mean, and listen, I think there's, at least as I'm listening, it's a bit cathartic to know that there are lots and lots of things that I can do differently, that you're not like, here's the most important thing. That would make me feel a little asphyxiated. So I'm pretty down with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem is for me, I see diet trends come and go. Every month there's a new diet trend, a new diet book. I don't like that approach. I like what I eat. I think we mustn't lose sight of enjoying what we eat, that kids enjoy what they eat. And I think we just have to make small changes, and you can do those small changes gradually and find out what works. Listen to your body, monitor your body. You mentioned tofu. I have tofu. I was a twig as a kid, but I'm on a statin. I have high cholesterol. I'm on the verge of pre-diabetes, but I monitor what I eat, my glucose, I monitor what I eat, and I'm able to kind of keep that at bay. So I think, kids can do the same thing. We're not like asking you to monitor your kids' glucose levels, but you don't need to. You can see your kids' glucose levels, right? If they're rolling on the floor, they're having a sugar dip. If they're bouncing off the walls, they're having a sugar high.
Problem. Right.
So we need to try and make the kind of adjustments we're talking about so that they're more regulated and more stable.
Yeah. I love that, something is always better than nothing, and something leads
Yeah.
to more often. I talk about that in almost every part of my practice, from meditation to when I encourage, there's times where someone, I say, hey, can you just do cookies, cake, and candy right now? Right. Like, it's just, it all counts, because I think that's the esteemable piece. And then you say, oh, look at, I did that. Oh,
it's a lifelong journey that we're dealing with here. So we're not going to fix it overnight. If you enjoy cooking, another quick tip I would say is just use less sugar. Okay. So you don't need to buy a fancy sugar or stevia or some of these alternatives. You're making a cake tonight or cookies, take the recipe and just eliminate a third of the sugar that the recipe calls for, maybe even a half. And you're still going to have some great cookies. It might even taste better.
It's a relieving conversation, right? You're like, it's very relieving. Like, we say that, I don't even cook. And I'm like, oh, okay, I could do that. And I think that for parents, like, it's such a hard job. And it's like these little changes. And this book is so good. I mean, I could obviously talk to you guys for 4 hours. I don't know if anyone else is interested in that, but, but like, I think buy this book, because it's just like, we literally scratch the surface, not just on that book. Hi.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi, Sugarproof.
Yeah. Sugarproof. It's so good. Like, because we scratch the surface on behavioral technique, we scratch the surface on snacks, we scratch the surface on recipe, we scratch the surface on everything. And so if you're intrigued, guess what? There's more. And I thank you guys so much for coming and visiting me. And I really do appreciate you. And I'm so glad to have you as friends and colleagues. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much.
Okay.